Story 1. In addition to what has already been said, they cannot use a computer. They can browse the web, but are unable to perform basic tasks such as attaching documents to emails or understanding file paths. Many of my students are worse at these tasks than my parents. Story 2. Non-existent reading comprehension. There are many reports from teachers of upper middle school students who cannot identify the main character of an elementary level paragraph or determine the theme of a simple passage. It genuinely scares me that, by the next election, some of the children who lost critical learning years because of the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic will vote based on what others tell them to think because they lack the ability to research for themselves. Story 3. I teach young children Generation Alpha. Many cannot persevere through a challenge without falling apart. It is not the occasional crying because of a rough day. It is crying because they cannot find a notebook and expect someone to rescue them, even though if they searched their desk for more than half a second, they would find it. They do not understand that actions have consequences. My class was out of control in the lunchroom, running, pushing, throwing food, and they acted surprised when the teacher supervising lunch kept them in during recess. They are also lazy. We are beginning to learn how to answer a question in a complete sentence and use evidence from a text to support an idea. I am not asking for a 10-page thesis. I want something like, I know the boy is happy at the end of the story because he said, "This was a great day." I model the skill and give sentence starters, but they still cannot complete the starters. They will write, "He is happy," and expect me to respond, "Perfect. This is wonderful." Much of this stems from poor parenting. It is not just tablet devices and TikTok. Many parents intervene before a child is challenged and fix problems for them, so the child never learns to solve problems. They expect me to spoon-feed answers and refuse to do anything that requires more than a minute of thinking. Parents also make excuses for their children's behavior and do not discipline them. This week a parent told me that the problem is not that their daughter talks in class. The problem is that other children talk to her when she talks to them. I do not expect these children to be able to function in careers that require more than doing exactly what they want and asking nothing of them. Story 4. Consider how large the gulf will be between educated, critical thinkers and reactionary illiterates, and how the latter will significantly outnumber the former. Story 5. I am a high school nurse and this is what I see. They have no patience and expect instant results. They do not understand that there is no instant cure. For example, they think I am crazy because I want them to sit for 10 minutes with ice on an injury. They cannot handle being uncomfortable at all. They want to call their parents and go home for everything. They experience a great deal of anxiety. They come into the clinic very anxious, reporting difficulty breathing, shaking, limb numbness, and a panicked appearance. When I ask if they might be anxious about something, they often deny it, even though it is obvious. It often appears suddenly and without a clear trigger. I deal with many mental health concerns. These young people need support. Story 6. Sheer ignorance is alarming. Many people do not read books and consequently have limited vocabularies. I rarely encounter people who think critically. They are raised to take standardized tests and to consume content rather than to analyze and contemplate. It is terrifying. Story 7. Illiteracy is widespread, and common sense is very low. Many cannot read or count money, and they struggle to hold conversations because their attention spans are very short. They display behavior issues at school due to withdrawal from screen time, and they cannot be disciplined because they are apathetic. They do not care about anything. Story 8. Illiteracy is a serious problem. Granted, my sample size is not large, but not a single one of the children I interact with is good at reading or at understanding what they read. Story 9. I mentioned it elsewhere in response to how tariffs might impact my work. But I am a biochemist and I often oversee the hiring process at the biotech company where I work. I have not had an American with a strong, competitive resume appear in my inbox for a while. Even for common research assistant roles, there are almost no applicants. So when I hear from teachers that the kids are getting worse, I dread what it is going to be like for Americans trying to break into technology, constantly having to compete with candidates from countries whose education systems are strong, such as China, South Korea, and many European Union countries. Story 10. I see a general lack of empathy and so much social anxiety. Sometimes I am sure my grandkids would rather text people than have a face-to-face conversation, even with their friends. Story 11. I am a teacher. The issues that worry me are cell phone addiction, teenagers in class, at the bus stop, crossing the street, or riding a bike often keep their heads down. It makes me sad. Inability to focus. Meme culture and short-form content feel like brain rot, shortening attention spans. A widespread lack of financial understanding, low aspiration, and little interest in developing job skills that could help them in the future. Many will be surprised by how hard their parents work and how expensive it is to live in their hometown. A widespread lack of understanding of the forces that shaped our current political environment. They will soon enter that environment as voting-age adults. Many may take the state of affairs for granted, become resigned to authoritarianism, or even embrace it. The will to enact positive change seems absent, which saddens me deeply. This is not all young people. I would say it affects more than half, but there are many who give me great hope. The bright, intelligent, creative, and deeply feeling students I have may be the forces holding back the ugly parts of the future. I hope empathy, self-reliance, and intelligence see a resurgence among youth. It makes me happy to see young people discovering older technology. I hope they someday realize the value of rejecting the need to be connected to the internet every moment of every day. There is so much more to enjoy in the world than a cell phone. I understand that for many teens it is the only escape in their lives. I hope they can also escape the grip of technology. Story 12. I found the Ferengi much more ominous than the Klingon. Story 13. They will expect to consume everything in 30-second sound bites. Story 14. 1. Tendency toward collectivism and failure to value individualism. 2. Low resourcefulness and no habit of making do. 3. Limited curiosity. 4. Obsession with appearance over authentic experience. 5. Poor reading skills. Comprehension and inability to read more than 2 sentences or 5 bullet points. 6. Low resilience in the face of adversity or challenge. 7. Weak future time orientation. 8. Financial illiteracy. 9. Ignorance of and indifference to history and the humanities. 10. Self-centeredness. Story 15. Their arrogance and misuse of buzzwords from online YouTube therapy sessions, for example, claiming they were traumatized after that last math class, are concerning. Their self-centered behavior will cause trouble for all of us in the future. Story 16. There is a growing lack of critical thinking and an inability to distinguish truth from what people are spoon-fed by various media outlets that do not care about the public's best interests. We have already seen the consequences of this trend over the past 20 years, and it will only get worse. Story 17. As a member of Generation Z, I am afraid that Generation Alpha will not do as well in school because some parents keep placing them in front of tablets. Story 18. They cannot read, write, or think critically at an alarming rate. Story 19. I am a millennial, so I am not sure if I should fear Generation Z or Generation Alpha in this scenario. Either way, I am more scared for them than of them. I do think we are going to see a segment of young people become more traditionalist, yearning for simpler times they never knew, and I fear they may bring back some of our old hateful ghosts in the process. Story 20. Their relationship to the internet. How much time they spend online versus in-person activities. How it is used as a babysitter. How protections for children online are inadequate. How predators and bullies freely use it to target children. The amount and variety of pornography available to minors and how that warps perceptions of sexuality, and how little guidance schools provide to help children distinguish real from fake and to understand propaganda, automated accounts, and algorithms. Story 21. The boys aren't growing up. They all seem to be on psychiatric medications and living in their mother's or grandmother's basements. They have no ambition, few hobbies or skills, are slovenly, not interested in college, cannot hold a job or maintain a relationship, yet are overconfident and misogynistic. Meanwhile, young women are doing well. College, work, fitness, active lifestyles, and taking on adult responsibilities. It's bizarre. I am Generation X and never had children. Is it just my circles? Has anyone else noticed this? Story 22. My parents taught me to read, write, count, spell, and do basic math before I started kindergarten. You did not start kindergarten unless you could write your name and address and count to 10. I have not seen a parent sit down at the table with their child to teach them anything in years. Which is crazy because Generation Alpha is the first generation not allowed out of the house. Children are often not permitted to play outside alone, go to friends' houses, have sleepovers, or host friends. Most of their social interaction comes from tablets, the classroom, or organized sports and playgroups their parents enrolled them in. You would think parents so overprotective that their children cannot even trick or treat would put more effort into having fun and doing activities at home. Story 23. On election day, there was a hoax, nationwide I believe, originating from a crisis line that told schools there was an active shooter on campus. We were in lockdown until the police cleared the building. I was very frightened but tried to remain calm for the students. After classes ended, in a school of 1,200 students, I saw or heard of no one showing concern. I suppose they think this is normal in today's world. Story 24. Their inability to function when things get tough is striking. I work with many 18 to 25-year-olds, and the second something becomes too difficult or they are told something they do not want to hear, they sit on the floor and refuse to do anything or stomp around crying that we are all toxic and abusive toward them. I see it in other places as well. Unfortunately, part of life is dealing with challenges, and things will not always go your way. Their reactions are downright frightening. Story 25. No critical thinking skills. People will just search online because of artificial intelligence. They will not develop their own positions through experience. Instead, they will claim that artificial intelligence knows everything and is always correct. Story 26. As a teacher, I have a lot to say. I am Generation Z, and many of my students are also Generation Z. I have a mutual understanding with them. We share language and interests, and I see myself in them every day, from the best to the worst. Things are very different for Generation Alpha. I do not teach any this year, but I supervised them on a field trip recently. They are so different it is quite unsettling. Many display short attention spans, an unusual sense of humor, marked social awkwardness, and little sense of individuality. These students are difficult to talk to and often lack social cues. It may be because I did not grow up in the same era, but I see children affected by TikTok and similar media. They often seem to display behaviors that remind me of autism, and, ironically, the students in the autism class of the same age are far more polite, understanding, and socially aware. I am worried about a generation shaped largely by the internet and guided by algorithms. Generation Alpha might as well be called Generation Algorithm. Story 27. Their sadness is apparent. Young people seem somewhat depressed. Sad people tend not to move things forward. They just try to survive. We removed the reasons they had for optimism and monitored their every move, and now they feel resigned. Story 28. They have to think in groups, but that thinking is based on vibes and feelings rather than facts and data. I am confused. When I was a child, we believed the information age would produce intelligent people who could decisively act on data. If the data is not available, how do they find, ingest, and comprehend it? Now their decisions and ideas are fed to them. They have outsourced their thinking to someone else. Even here in South Africa, our election cycle was full of comments about how uninformed young people are. Election campaign influencer videos often drew comments such as "Thanks for this, I might not have gone to register to vote," or "I love you so much, I will register too." Even juniors who graduate from university and take development internships are shocking. Mentoring becomes torture. I would understand if they were first-year students, but I cannot understand how they make it past graduation and into the workforce. I am convinced of this because they all just used generative artificial intelligence tools. There is no individuality anymore, and the hive seems driven more by conformity than intelligence. Listening to them read should be included in the Geneva Conventions. Story 29. 1. They cannot read or write cursive handwriting. 2. They cannot do basic mental arithmetic. 3. They have no understanding of basic finance. 4. Many cannot write a paper longer than 1 page. 5. They have no sense of history. That is, if a YouTuber claims Nazi Germany had a battalion of black Schutzstaffel soldiers, it must be true. Story 30. They cannot tell the difference between facts and propaganda online. Story 31. They are socially broken. All they do is consume YouTube and TikTok content without seeking self-improvement. They do not want to read, draw, solve puzzles, or even play games that foster creativity. Children have stopped developing critical thinking, and their opinions are often based on superficial edits. They do not respect their elders and expect to be treated like royalty. I know the same can be said about Generation Z, but we were not exposed to brain-rotting short videos. Videos used to have more meaning. They could teach things and provide food for thought. Aside from Elsagate, most people refuse to watch that content for long. I cannot comprehend what society will become when these children are adults. Story 32. They are functionally illiterate and cannot read above a 7th grade level for more than 10 minutes. They cannot use a computer, schedule and attend appointments, or identify misinformation on TikTok. They believe they are smarter than everyone else, but they are consistently uninformed and tend to accept conspiracy theories because they do not know how to verify information through reputable sources. They have poor conflict resolution skills and typically withdraw or avoid problems when something becomes difficult. Story 33. A group of shut-ins, homeschooled by day drinkers and already online. I do not see the problem. Story 34. Children today often show little respect for authority, the elderly, or even their parents. They may grow up indifferent to others, with little empathy and focused only on themselves. There are exceptions, of course, but the majority of children today are like this. Story 35. I am a member of Generation X and am much more scared of the previous generation that is fighting tooth and nail to avoid giving up power. Story 36. They are entering the most complicated information environment in human history, armed with the least developed critical thinking skills. Story 37. They believe they can demand a high starting salary despite having no work experience, which totally amuses me. Story 38. I am kind of worried about all the new slang. I am from Generation Z and I can barely understand what people say these days. Most of the slang I have learned came from Tumblr or from older people like millennials. I have no idea what Riz, Skibbity, or Phantom Tax mean. I am still trying to wrap my head around what Major League Gaming was all about. I am not ready for this. Story 39. As someone in Generation Z, here are a few thoughts. The vast majority seem to have minimal understanding of literature. They were surprised that I knew much of Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade. For the most part, people have a strong aversion to reading, with exceptions among somewhat literate readers for Colleen Hoover, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and Percy Jackson especially. Those 18 and older. There are a few exceptions. On my course, about 1/3 are reading some classics, but that is to be expected because it is a creative writing and publishing course. I, for one, am reading American Prometheus. If you have not bought a copy, you should. It won the Pulitzer Prize for a very good reason. Similarly, the way the education system is structured at the moment does not prioritize critical thinking or new ideas. What you hear instead is talk about employment, careers, and grades. To give credit to my school, they had some good arts programs which few students used but were valuable. A few people I know have artistic pursuits, and I have managed to carve out a small creative bubble for myself, but the vast majority are not interested in creative pursuits at all. Story 40. The level of dependence on technology is increasing. We are already very dependent on it, and it will only continue to grow, which scares me because people may not learn basic life skills. Story 41. They actually find the skibbity broccoli hairdo cool and attractive. Story 42. They will have to confront things that no other generation in living memory has faced. We prepare them for this by mocking their fears and the pain they feel about the future that awaits them. Such circumstances will test the resilience of the strongest souls, let alone a generation of gaslit, scapegoated, and terrified people. Story 43. How easily led and manipulated they are by charlatans and snake oil salesmen. Story 44. My son is 9 years old. Here are the things he currently cannot do. Ride a bike without training wheels. He is scared and his biological mother babied him until he was 6. comprehend beyond a certain level. Sound words out, he gives up immediately. Read the words on the screen. I bought a karaoke game because he loves singing in the car. He knows most of the songs by heart, but he cannot read the lyrics. He is in third grade. Basic multiplication. I am worried about the lack of effort he shows. I do not know who put the idea in his head that he does not need school, but it is going to be a rough next 10 years. Story 45. Honestly, their parents are to blame. There are many parents who do not teach their children basic skills and then expect schools to do so. For example, my mother works as a teaching assistant and recently discovered that about 6 students in year 6, the final year of primary school in the United Kingdom when children are about 11 years old, cannot read an analog clock. They do not understand time outside of a digital display. Story 46. To be blunt, an entire generation has grown up in a cult-like environment thanks to social media, which is bad enough. Many seem to believe they are perfect superhero cliches and that their generation is superior to every other, to the point that they actively ignore people trying to educate them. Despite greater access to information, they are proving more selfish, small-minded, and hateful than prior generations, no doubt in part because of a we are better mindset. They are so cultish that on social media you frequently see members of this generation expressing hatred over meaningless things like differences of opinion on television shows. If they had more motivation, I would be worried about a new Nazi party emerging from them. It is disgusting. Story 47. As someone in the next generation, 22 years old, and as someone who makes some of the same mistakes, this concerns me deeply. An astonishing number of young people form opinions about people or issues they do not really know anything about. The phrase herd mentality has become a buzzword and lost the urgency it deserves. I used to watch videos where young people are asked for their opinions on ideologies, public figures, or events. Nothing makes me cringe more than when someone says they like or dislike something but cannot give a reason, or at least an understandable one. That does not mean their views are inherently right or wrong. The problem is that they cannot provide any reasoning for their stance. For example, do you like Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, or Justin Trudeau? Yes. Why do you think that? Awkward silence. Whether those videos are staged is not the point. How many of us hold opinions not because we truly believe them, but because people we care about tell us what to think? How many of us do not follow reliable news or current events, but can still claim to like or hate someone without being able to explain why? These people are prime targets for propaganda and media manipulation. They struggle to distinguish reality from illusion, truth from falsehood, logical arguments from fallacies. The internet is a powerful tool that gives access to vast information. Yet many in our generation have trouble filtering it. There is so much information and so many lies and biases that for newcomers it can be overwhelming. Learning to filter and use information well is daunting, and some simply give up. Getting to the truth can be very difficult. So some say, just avoid politics. At this point, it seems all politicians lie, so why bother figuring out who is good? Why choose a side? Media sources can be dubious, and some problems cannot be fully understood without direct experience in the relevant jobs or work. So why try? We are a generation that often cannot say, I do not know about this topic, but I can research and try to separate truth from lies, even if the history and complexity are confusing. A major problem for the next generation is the inability to use the abundance of information effectively and to understand how the world works. We need to form stances based on real research, not repeat what others pressure us to say, and be able to confidently back up the knowledge we have investigated. If I asked every supporter of a particular idea or person to explain why they support them, could all of them give a confident and understandable answer? This is a question I ask myself. Story 48. My niece asked my dad whether her generation is doomed because of Trump. That scares me. Story 49. As someone once said about Margaret Thatcher, they have no hinterland and no sense of history. More accurately, they are not being provided with a proper sense of historical context. They think the world did not exist before they arrived and will not exist after they are gone. And not only they do not understand where today's dominant ideologies came from or how they evolved, how the technologies they use developed and depend on interconnected systems of commerce and exchange, or how political power circulates around the world. It is no wonder they feel unfocused anger and disillusionment. Such feelings are an understandable response to constant bewilderment. To them, events seem to occur repeatedly for no discernible reason. Story 50. They are just a product of their environment. I never want to fall into the boomer back in my day, this new generation mindset. Story 51. They have no understanding of anything and no logic or reasoning skills. Story 52. They are inheriting a dying planet, student loan debt, low wages, and rising housing costs, which means they are essentially serfs with the illusion of freedom. Story 53. Some people genuinely do not care but complain when that leads to consequences. Also, we cannot forget that the pandemic changed education during important developmental years for many, and that will have a significant impact. Story 54. Many people misspell losing or lose as loosing or loose. I think it is about 73 million. The number of direct messages I have received saying I am just mad because Kamala Harris is a loser is frightening. Story 55. Nothing much. Each generation claims the next is the worst and will ruin the world. My grandparents said it about my parents. My parents said it about me. I said it about my children. Now my children are saying it about their children. I know. This time they think it is for real. Story 56. Think about their depiction of women. Can you imagine growing up as a child seeing OnlyFans creators promoting content? It would be a new level of objectification. Story 57. I read comments in a space-focused Snapchat group where kids were saying things like, "Why do we waste our money sending things into space? We know it's all empty and waste of tax dollars. We should just spend it on the military." Everyone agreed with him. Story 58. The attitude, lack of critical thinking, and dependence on technology. Story 59. Brain rot from consuming TikTok and short-form videos on every platform. Story 60. Computer illiteracy. My nephew has never used a Windows personal computer. He has always used iPhones. He is now thinking about going to the same information technology school I attended. He is in for a rough awakening. Story 61. It is only 7 seasons long, and we all know Tasha Yar will not be there at the end. Story 62. In the United States, they are largely unaware of history. This is not entirely their fault. The education system is failing them, and in right-leaning states it is being whitewashed. Story 63. They cannot read and have little or no critical thinking skills. Story 64. Klingon? Do you mean seriously? They do not learn anything useful at school, yet they will have to keep the economy running and pay for our generation's pensions. Story 65. They are so stupid. I know every generation says the one below it is dumber or lazier, but there is evidence of it this time. This is not coming from a place of superiority. I'm legitimately concerned they will never be able to take care of themselves. Story 66. The political right is trying to limit educational opportunities and promote patriotic instruction, which is what happens in totalitarian regimes rather than in free countries. Story 67. They have read so little and lack knowledge of history. Story 68. How many kids today are struggling with basic subjects like reading? Story 69. I know several people who just graduated from high school and do not know how many months are in a year. Story 70. The fact that we are relying on them to defend us in war and not dismantle Social Security the moment they can. Story 71. Not being able to hold nuanced discussions or viewpoints. Everything has to be black and white. Believing that inclusivity and diversity in media is a brave new concept when it has been around for decades. Story 72. A reliance on technology and a disregard for the value of education that is not purely practical to everyday life. Also, an inability to handle any degree of negative emotion without immediately self-diagnosing. Kids, sometimes you will feel anxious. That is very different from having an anxiety disorder. Story 73. There is a lack of coping mechanisms. I do not understand why. I am not a parent. Many people seem unable to cope when things go awry and are eager to adopt a label that excuses or explains their inability to manage. This is not a criticism of those with genuine issues. I am referring to the self-diagnosed. Story 74. The lack of problem-solving abilities and common sense in 6th grade students is alarming. Story 75. I am concerned that they expect everyone to adopt their point of view. Story 76. The episode with parasitic bug aliens that infested several Starfleet admirals terrified me as a child. I remember the ending where they melted a man with phasers. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.